Alright, I started this project by cutting off one face of the log on the bandsaw. I'm not really that worried about it being square because I have a jointer and I can just flatten that out later. Now I took off the other face to begin getting one side at a right angle so I can cut out the pieces that I want. Alright, now it's time to glue up the top of the mallet, and I'm going to glue a piece of maple, hard maple, between two strips of oak that I just cut from that log. Make sure to spread all the glue evenly so there are no gaps, because that'll come back and bite you in the butt later when you're turning. Alright, while that's drying, I'm going to move on to the handle. You can find the center by drawing a line between the two corners. Alright, now I'm setting up the lathe for turning. I took the spur drive out and marked it on the center of the piece I'm going to turn for the handle. Put the spur drive back in, and now I can tighten it back down with these two wrenches. And I'm going to put the piece between the two centers and bring the tailstock in and tighten that down. Okay, decent pressure. Spin it, and now I can start turning. First thing I'll do is take it down to round with a roughing gouge. This oak turned rather nicely, I thought, so I had it at the lowest speed right now because it's still a square. Now I started to rough out the shape where the mallet handle will connect to the head, and that is eventually going to be 1/2 inch, so I can just drill a 1/2 inch hole through the head of the mallet before I turn it, and it'll connect nicely. Using the parting tool to mark out the area, and I'm going to have the handle glued through and overhanging, not flush with the head. So the length doesn't really matter, just as long as it's a little longer than the mallet, or a little longer than the diameter of the mallet. And I can start removing some of the material with the roughing gouge, not bringing it anywhere close to 1/2 inch yet, just getting it down there. Now I can switch and start to shape out the handle. I realize this is way too big right now, way too thick, so I started to remove that with the roughing gouge and give it a slight taper with the skew chisel. I also started to round over the back a bit with the skew chisel, so it'll fit nicely in your hand when because it's a shorter mallet. Now I can start shaping the little tenon that'll go into the slot in the handle. So I'm trying to get it to 1/2 inch. Right now it was 6 point something. So I just remove a bit with the skew chisel, check it with the calipers, slowly backing it down to a little less than 1/2 inch. And I think on this pass with the skew chisel, I get it down to 4.9 something. That's good enough for me. After the tenon's the correct size, I can start giving this the final shape, and I'll just finish up that little round over with the skew and kind of smooth it out with it, and then I'll go and do some sanding. And I'll start with 150 grit, or actually 60 grit, and then go to 150 and then 220, and sand that down real nice and smooth. I actually lost the finishing footage of the handle, but you'll see it later when I finish the head of the mallet. I just wipe on poly, do coat, and it looks really nice, really durable. Now I can take the head stock out of the clamps, cut it to length, cut off those loose edges, and then I'll cut it to square. And you can do that by setting the fence to the width of the piece. And now I'll drill a 1/2-inch hole through the piece, and that's directly in the center. Now I'll find the center by crossing the corners again, and then I'll put that on the lathe. Start by getting it to round, taking it down with the roughing gouge. It's going slow because it's thicker and it isn't square yet. But now it's down to round, and just getting it down to the final diameter I want. After I got the bulk of the material removed, I'll come back with the skew and give it a little more uniform look, so it doesn't have all those bumps and grooves all over it. And then I'll size the handle and figure out how long the head should be. And I did that, and it was about 1.5 inches from the center of the 1/2-inch hole. And then I took the parting tool and marked out where I needed to cut. And I'm not actually going to cut all the way through because I still got to finish it. And I just like to cut things on the bandsaw so this thing doesn't go flying. I'll sand it with 150 grit, and then switch to 220 grit and give it a really nice finish. And I have the polyurethane finishing footage here. And then just took a little cloth, wiped it on, spun it around, and then give that a day to dry. Then I can take it off the lathe. Now, like I said, I like to cut things out on the bandsaw rather than parting them off. So I cut that and then sanded it flush on the disc sander. And then I did a little 220 sanding off footage to give that a nice finish. And I'll glue that handle and the head together now, twist it in real tight, and then finish up all the finishing that I didn't get on the lathe. And just make sure you watch your glue lines too. So now I can test it out, and it's just a carving mallet, so it's not removing a lot of material, but it's doing what I need it to do, and I can also use small chisels with it.